Well, hello friends. Welcome to Thursday night. It's a stormy, rainy night here in Marshall, and hopefully that won't impact our time and experience together, but we're rolling. Who's with us so far? I'm gonna pour a little glass of wine as I wait to see who can chime in for this week's mystery wine blind tasting. Hi, Christine and Star and family. It's so cool that you can actually play along this week. And McCarty's are here. Hi guys. It's so good to see or have you here with us. Matthew, great to have you with us as well this evening. Isabel, as always, wonderful to have you. You've been a loyal, continual taster each and every week, and I love it. Thank you. We're going to get to the bottom of this glass and perhaps even the bottom of this wine. Kathy's with us. And hi, Melanie. How are you? Good evening to everyone. How cool. Interesting. Interesting. Jan's with us. Nicole, with you as we go on. But we've got a red tonight. So what do we have? Hey, Sharon. Great to have you with us too. Is this wine expressive? What are you seeing? Right off the bat, what are your initial senses telling you before we actually begin the evaluation process? What do you see? What do you smell? What's happening so far? And Jen's here, Matthew's there, Karina's with Erica, Rick is in here, that's great, hi Rick, and Mary Jane, the Kestenbaum crew is with us this evening, that's great. So many fantastic folks who have been with us each week are back again. Bob is with us this evening, that's awesome, hi Bob, how are you? Perhaps I'll see you and anyone else who would be potentially interested at Lost Creek on Sunday. We'll be doing a tasting up there. Part of our sommelier series, a program called Family Matters. We're going to talk about wines that come from families in the depth of multi-generational production or new generations taking over old productions. So it'll be a fun day of tasting some wines. But back to this particular wine that's in front of us. All right, so this is red. It's clean, clear, right? But it has sort of, what color would you say? Are we in the purple camp, a ruby camp, a tawny kind of camp? What are you seeing? But deep red color coming from Erica and a garnet element. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fair. It has some of that to it for sure. There's a deep red core and a slight kind of reddish, brickish variation. The color is pretty consistent all the way through, so it's probably relatively youthful, right? So what are we getting by way of appearance? Does this wine look to be fairly robust? Is it a light wine? That starts to give us an indication on whether or not this could be certain varietals. For example, if we're talking about Tannat or Petit Verdot, we probably see something that's very dark, very rich, and a little less see-through. And if we're talking about something like Pinot Noir, it would be something that would give us a lighter color overall. Hi, Jacob. Hey, man, how are you doing? Jacob and I traveled the world of wine together a number of years back, a decade back probably at this point. Susan, hello, you're saying garnet? Yep, garnet, deep garnet, cool. Yep, good descriptors there all the way around. So what varietals would go with that color? And we're not necessarily trying to say that it is that particular varietal because of that color, but we start to build a list of what the potential varietals are. And so what jumps out? What might it be, and also what might it not be? And that's sometimes an easier place to begin. If you say, well, you know what, it's not, in the simplest of terms, it's not Albarino, it's not white wine. So it's fantastic from that regard. You can rule out some of the wines that are here. Like, I don't know that I would say this is Pinot, but I don't know enough to know for sure yet. I'm not sure that it's Gamay, for example. I'm not positive that this would be Tannat or Petit Verdot on the other end of the spectrum. You know, I don't think that this is necessarily, say, Amarone with a deeper, darker color. It's got a little bit of that reddish color cast to it. So Zinfandel, Christine is also saying that's ruby red. Don't think Petit Verdot coming from Erica. Yeah, so it's not purple, right? And so this is just a way to start to build a profile of what this wine might be, and that allows you then to start to craft some ideas, which you can then verify again on the nose and on the palate. So Yeah, Kathy, good point there. Not Pinot Noir, not Sangiovese, right? Probably. So don't hold firm to these initial impressions. They're just guideposts. They're starting to send you on a journey. And at some points, we need to back up all the way and go in another direction. But right off the bat, especially as you taste more and more frequently, and this is what we've been doing together for those of you that have been with us for a while, is to learn these associations between a smell, between an appearance, and a varietal and a place. Like last week we talked about the wine being really of place, being Virginian. It seemed Virginian. It seemed familiar to a number of folks, which was really neat. And that association is something that we're trying to build up. And that's a taste memory that once you bank that and you can start to evaluate a wine, you don't want to rush to that opinion, and you want to work the grid and you want to work the deductive process, but you also can rely then on your intuition to help you as you develop that over time. So we're here in California Zinfandel coming from Kathy too, to echo what Karina said. Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmenere, Syrah maybe. Cool, great. We've got a list of varietals that are in the running. So in my mind, we're kind of in the middle of a range of color and intensity of fruit, right? So we're not on the far end of the spectrum where it's purple and inky and black, but we're also not on the light, very even sort of dusty, see-through kind of variation. So we're right in the middle, and Zinfandel, Cabernet Sauvignon, depending on where it's grown, Carmenere, Syrah, those types of varietals absolutely have that potential. So that's all. We've done all of that before we have even really jumped in and smelled and tasted for sure. So we're giving ourselves a structure. All right, so let's smell it. What do you smell? What's the first thing that you smell? And if you need a focus point, you can use the grid that we have that provide on the website, or that you may have picked up when you picked up the wine. But generally speaking, you can also break it down into a little acronym FEW: fruit, earth, and wood. Thank you, Doug Frost, Master Sommelier, who kind of taught me that perspective. It's really a handy way to think of things. So what fruit do you smell first? Is it berry fruit? Is it tree fruit? So is it an apple or pear? Is it stone fruit like a peach or a nectarine, an apricot? Is it, then what is the quality of the fruit? Is the fruit still on the vine ripening? Is it fresh? Is it super ripe? Is it stewed, cooked, dried? And those all give you indications. Peter, hi man, how are you, sir? Peter Glander and I worked together at Blackberry Farm. There was a chef down there with me when I was working there and where I met Star. So fantastic to have you virtually here this evening, sir. And Rick, welcome. How are you? Thank you for popping out for dinner this week. Steven saying plum, absolutely, first thing there. Mushroom notes in the background from Matthew. What's in the foreground for you, Matthew, on top of that mushroom? Plum is echoed. Quality on the nose. There's a hint of, how cool is that, Jen? Nice descriptor. Pomegranate thrown in there. Yes, I think that's cool. Jan's with us. Hi, Jan. It's riper fruit though, isn't it? Like, are you getting, there's some interesting quality that you got pomegranate, which has a tart element to it, and of course a kind of a ripe sugary element to it. The plum element, which gives you ripeness but also a little bit of sourness. There's a raisiny element here for me too, just a tiny bit. It's faint. It's more like the aroma of the box of raisins after you've eaten all of the raisins out of it. Ripe black plum coming from Kathy, and Expedition Vintage is with us. Cool post the other day from you guys with the Expedition vehicle and a shot of the front of Field and Main and some of the cabanas. Thank you for posting that. It was really neat to see that. Jen's also noting petroleum a little bit here. So like a rubbery quality, Jen? Expand on that petroleum for me. What are you smelling that's petroleum oriented? Because you can get kind of camphor oil, you can get rubber, you can get kind of tar. So what are you smelling there? Red cherry and alcohol. Rick, I thank you for that, because that was my first smell. First thing that jumped out of the glass for me was a bit of alcohol. There was a heat on the nose. And I think that's an interesting interplay here. It's taken me to a warmer climate as a result. Candy's putting out South America. Rick Davis likes the empty raisin box. Steven's putting out low. That's cool. So we've got this earthy element, this mushroomy earthy quality. We've got some kind of black-red fruit. Ryan's throwing in fig. Ryan's my brother-in-law. Hey man, how are you, sir? Glad you're watching tonight too, and playing along actually in Michigan. Mothballs from Kathy. So we're in an interesting camp with some fruit for sure, and it's fairly pronounced fruit, right? This is a moderately aromatic wine, but then there's the black cherry, the earth, the kind of pomegranate. So red-black fruit interplay that's here, and some of it's dried and some of it's fresh. So it's kind of helping us round that out. Let's reference back what we thought of by way of what was first smelled. We talked about Cabernet Sauvignon, Carmenere, Syrah. What else was thrown out there? Merlot. What in particular can we rule out, or maybe not think of as highly, maybe not put as much weight toward? For example, say Syrah. The pepper kind of quality that you might pick up on Syrah is not in the nose. We can look to verify that as we taste it. So that's in the running still, of course, but not necessarily as pronounced. The plum element that we talked about a lot is a key indicator perhaps of Merlot or a blend. And I think that's kind of a strong indicator that we can consider Merlot in this run. But South America being one option. We talked about Carmenere too. Carmenere oftentimes gives a little bit of a pyrazine note, a green bell peppery note. And Melanie, I think adding for sure to this Grenache is absolutely worthwhile, especially for the alcohol. Grenache is a pretty high alcohol grape, typically, especially grown in warmer areas, which it typically is. And so Grenache we should absolutely consider. And Rick's saying minty eucalyptus plus alcohol equals mothballs. Huh. Interesting. That's a fantastic equation, a taste equation that we've just discovered this evening. Okay, I see that. That's really cool because I've got the mintiness and that alcohol element, and if you push right through that, then you're sitting in an old sweater from the closet, and there you go. Wow. So the mintiness, right? We talked about a couple of times ago when we were tasting the Shiraz from Australia, and that eucalyptus note was there, was present, and that eucalyptus and that ripe fruit really led us to Australia and also potentially to California Cabernet. So maybe we should consider that in California Cabernet perspective. How cool. Okay, so we've got some ideas, right? We've got a little profile that we're building, and let's try this wine and see if the high alcohol is there. Let's see if those fruits are there. Let's see if anything else comes out on the palate that might suggest what we've thought of so far is correct or not. So go ahead and have your first sip if you haven't already, like me, but I imagine a number of you are already there. Rick's also thrown out Mourvedre. Rick threw out Mourvedre, and Eric is throwing out a little licorice. Yeah, and to Rick's Mourvedre and the previous Grenache, a blend of Grenache and Mourvedre, a GSM blend, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre. We also were talking about Syrah. That's absolutely an option we should consider. The licoricey element is quite a nice call too. There's a savory note. There's some higher alcohol. So it's easy to get lost first and foremost when you taste into the flavor of the wine, which is appropriate. It's what we should be enjoying about wine. But if you can parse that out for a second, let's go back to evaluating just the taste. And by the taste and the flavor, I'm distinguishing the tastes that are on your palate. So sweet, sour, salty, but in this case, sour, right? And then also talking about the dryness, the textural component by way of the tannin, and the body weight. So does this wine have a high amount of tannin? Is it a light, medium, robust wine? Does it have a low, moderate, or high level of acidity? Where are you finding this wine? How's the alcohol? Is it still lingering in your mouth like it is mine? Hi, Roland. How are you? Great to have you with us this evening. It's been a long time since we actually got to see each other in person, but Roland's a great appreciator of wine, and in particular Alsatian wine. Yeah, Swanbergs are saying a medium tannin, medium plus. There's some tannin here for sure. It's got a little, you feel a little powdery quality, like you have somebody tucking some cotton balls up underneath your gums. And Robert and Tanya, welcome back. Glad to have you. It doesn't matter whether you come in moments early or moments late. We're just happy to have you here. Medium tannins from Stephen. Karina's saying she's got blackberry in the nose. Do you get blackberry in the palate then too? More petroleum elements, meaty, savory flavors from Kathy, medium tannins from Erica. The way it lingers makes me want to say, she says, bordering on high tannins. I think so. In the very end of the finish, right? So this is maybe a moderately finishing wine. The experience of the flavors come on pretty strong in the middle and then taper out. But what lingers is some of that tannin experience and some of the acidity and some of the alcohol for me. Christy's saying this goes great with truffle camembert. I'm pleased you shared that, but you should be sharing the cheese, not just the comment. That's hard to beat, I'm sure. That richness, the creaminess, and this might be quite lovely. Hey, Sarah. Sarah's back this evening, and I don't think this is her wine, but the way we'll know is whether or not she comments again. Because if she's just hovering, watching, it could be her wine again. And that I should have figured out last week as she was in there and didn't make any comments or ask any questions. I should have known that the wine last week was hers as a result of that alone. But welcome, Sarah. Yeah, I think this builds into some higher tannins. Yeah, it's. I wouldn't say it's the highest, most aggressive tannin. I mean, they're pretty structured tannin, but they kind of are aerated toward the finish. They're not so gripping that it's an uncomfortable experience, but there's some of that. All right, so let's talk. We've got about a moderate acidity, some tannin, a fairly robust wine with some ripeness by way of the fruit, right? Some wild raspberry, wild berry tartness, meaty elements, some earthy elements. And Brian's with us. Hey man, how are you? I don't know if you're across the street in the Bubble Decker or at home, but either way, we're happy to have you with us. My sister-in-law is watching too. This is a great night. Okay, so very short finish, Rick. Yeah, it's not super long in the finish. The experience at the finish is definitely the acid and the tannin and a little bit of that alcohol. What fruit are you digging into? Thank you, Jen, for that comment. Wow, tannins are building. It's such a neat experience to spend a half hour with a wine, and hopefully those of you that have these wines get to spend a little bit more time with them as we conclude these chats each week and kind of sit with the glass. A number of you have told me you do that. They change and they open and they evolve and they give you a lot more. And that's a cool part. Kathy's throwing out pinotage, black cherry, black fruit, fig, menthol, roasted meats. And you're absolutely right. There's a funny sinewyiness to this tannin here that reminds me of Senso. And pinotage is a cross between Pinot Noir and Senso, but it oftentimes comes out on the bigger end of the spectrum relative to, say, Pinot Noir. So it can be made in a way that's a little bit lighter. I think that's a very interesting call, and one that fits in an earlier case when people were throwing out the ideas of where it might be from, initially just based on the smell and appearance. We were talking a little bit about South Africa and South America as being an option. So let's keep pinotage in it. And the Swanbergs are noting that it looks young based on the legs. Yeah, it's got some glycerol and some elegance, and then the color is showing you that it's not a super big variation in color. So yeah, it's young. It's got youthful tannins too to boot. So I think we can comfortably say it's probably in the 2 to 4 year range. Pinotage. The petroleum element that was noted is a thing you'd find a lot of times, that rubber or burning rubber or an oily element that comes from pinotage. So that absolutely is a good call for this particular wine in that case. So we're thinking about pinotage. We were talking about Cabernet Sauvignon from California potentially with that mintiness. We're talking about Carmenere before. We were talking about a Grenache Syrah Mourvedre or some kind of Southern Rhone blend, whether it be in the Rhone or perhaps somewhere else. So what else? Yeah. the longer it's open, Rick's noting there's more charcoal, and Tanya's saying that the menthol is what's throwing her. She only gets get that from Cab Franc or even Mountain Cab Sauv. Yep. Saltiness, as Karina is asking. I'm not getting a whole bunch of minerality that way. What are you finding about wood, folks? I didn't see much in the way of wood, or I didn't smell much in the way of wood profile on the nose. And I'm not necessarily getting a lot of it on the palate either. Are you? Are you finding a cedared element? Are you finding a particular spice quality, something vanillin? So there is a little bit of a smokiness for the Swanbergs, and maybe that's an indication of wood. Yeah, there's I mean, I just finished a camping trip with my family, but there's a campfire smoke on your clothes, sleeping in the sleeping bag kind of smell. There's a sweatiness and a smokiness that comes through on this. That's interesting. A mild cedar from Melanie. Yeah, there's a definite, if you think of like cedar plank salmon, there's got that kind of a little bit of a cedar element there. It's faint though. It's not real prominent. It's not. I wouldn't like rush to say I think there's a whole bunch of new oak on this wine. There might be some older oak, or maybe 1% of some newer oak. And Erica's noting that this really reminds her potentially of Tannat. So we can certainly consider Tannat. Tannat's going to give you that tannin, and I'm not sure about the mintiness necessarily, but. It tastes. Let me ask the question that we kind of came to last week, but does this taste like a particular place to you? Are you comfortable saying this is one particular place versus another? And we can start with the broad categories of New World versus Old World. Is this a New World wine? Is this an Old World wine? Is this a New World wine that has some Old World technique? Is this an Old World wine with some ripeness? What do you think? Hi, Charlotte. How are you? So great to have you tonight. I'm so glad you're with us. Swanbergs are saying Tannat because of the smoke and the plum. That's cool. Tannat, Virginia. Tannat, Uruguay. Tannat, Mataran, southern France. What are you thinking? And New World, so that kind of answers my question. Not Virginia, coming from Erica. So more Old World and not Virginia, so that's an indication. So does that rule out for most of you? So South Africa and South America? I mean, Kathy, you were kind of throwing around Pinotage, which I'm assuming you mean from South Africa. Where are you at on that? Rick, what do you think about the Mourvedre? Are you thinking still like Southern Rhone? And yes, Jan, it has smoothed out a little bit, right? So that kind of short finish and the more aggressive tannin and the acid kind of alcohol experience of the finish is sort of kind of crescendoing a little bit, while a little more the fruit opens and envelops it and takes it more to the finish. The forwards are like in Tannat. He had one from Uruguay last week. Did you have this much tannin in it last week from the Uruguay and Tannat? The tannin Tannats I've tried have had a little bit more softness to it. Kathy's not convinced on a call. I wasn't prompting a call, but I'm curious if you were able to work your way out of Pinotage or if you're still working on that. Wow, that mintiness and some more of that fig kind of is building for me. That plum freshness is kind of giving away a little bit to more dried fruit on the nose for me, but like I want to go back to Australia with that mintiness. Hey, Danny, how are you? It's forever and a year ago that Danny and I worked together on buying a condo in Chicago. Yeah, the asphalt, she's saying, or the kind of petroleum element from Pinotage, Uruguay. But Cahors, yeah, Rick, thank you for that. We could do Malbec from France. We could do Tannat from France and Mataran and get this tannin, this structure, some of that plumminess. And oftentimes in Mataran, they're blending Tannat with Cabernet. And so you get some of that I'm pretty comfortable saying I don't think it's like a Cabernet, mountain fruit Cabernet like was tossed out earlier. How about you? You want to keep Cabernet running? The tannins in this don't relate as much to Cabernet as I would think typically. They're a little bit more rustic. So Cabernet, yes or no? I agree, Erica. Tannat's a really cool varietal. It's one that's exciting in Virginia to be able to kind of experience more than most places. And because of our interest in growing it here, we start to see more Tannat that's from around the world presented here, which is neat. Old World from Stephen, yeah. So if it's Old World, is it Southern France? That's kind of what everybody seems to be indicating. Not Cab, not Cab, not Cab. More menthol as it warms up. Yeah, there's quite a bit. And I don't, the particular vineyard perhaps, and yes, the tannins are mellowing out. Charlotte's saying not a Cab. I think I agree with you there, guys. I don't think this is Cab. So let's put Cab away. How about South America, because it came up early. Carmenere, we would have more pyrazine, probably not this much tannin, and the ripeness might be there, but do we think this is Carmenere? I mean, it has a reddish color, and that could be Carmenere indicative. It has ripeness, which it could be that, but many will have sort of that pyrazine note, and I'm not getting that, so I'm pretty comfortable walking away from that. Charlotte's noting Zin again, and that's not a bad thought. The Zin should be considered, right? So we could be talking about a Zinfandel from California Mountain Fruit or California Fruit that maybe even Lodi or something like that has a little bit of that mintiness. That's interesting. That's a worthwhile call. But the mintiness is coming out more and more. What are you laughing about? No to what? What was
Zin.
To the Zin?
I think.
How about Syrah? Should we consider Syrah still? Pepper? Black pepper? Any of that element here? I'm not picking up on that. Green is throwing out California Zin. I don't think that's a bad guess here. I don't think that's an off base one. Higher alcohol, right? We have some tannin. We have structure. And it just depends on where we're coming from. You can have a blacker, kind of darker, richer Zin, but throwing out Paso Robles as an option for this is an interesting idea. Or a Sonoma Zin, for example, which might have a little bit more red fruit. And that's kind of my next question. Thank you for prompting it, Melanie. So as we're starting to single out certain varietals, should we be singling out a single varietal and thinking about a blend? And then talking about Mourvedre and Syrah, Mourvedre and Grenache and Syrah. And I think there's a chance that we could be dealing with that. But Oh, Chris, I'm sorry, man. But if you want to play along to the very end and then just stop and come and get it at any point, you can play along and do it again later and kind of make your own assessment without knowing it. A Zin blend, that's interesting. Charlotte, that's very cool. Central Cali, yeah, for sure you would have helped us on that, Chris. I don't know, there's a tannin quality to this that's a little bit drying, and it is not as juicy, kind of associated with Zinfandel for me, generally speaking. I could be completely wrong about that. I mean, Rock Pile Zin from the northern part of Sonoma is more red fruit and a little bit more racy. It has tannin, so that would be a really cool wine, for example, to try. And this might have tannin like that, a bit depending on the vintage. But we had a lot of people say Old World, and so let's go back to, let's keep Zinfandel there. We'll take Carmenere out. We took Cabernet out. And Robert's prompting a question about Tannat and the color. Yeah, would we get this color? In fact, remember our discussion about the appearance of the wine right off the bat was about the color being indicative of a profile for Pinot Noir or a profile for not a profile for Pinot Noir or not a profile for Tannat, for example, because it wasn't so dark. So can we rule out Tannat? Because of that, we're getting a reddish color and a lot of red fruit into the plum fruit, and the structure's there. And Kathy's noting that it's still quite possible from Uruguay with some wines she's tried at the Walsh family vineyards. Yeah, there's a possibility. I think that's the ripeness of the fruit and then the interplay with some of the tartness is interesting, and that could be a play of somewhere more New World, somewhere warmer, like in South America, i.e. Uruguay. That's tough. Some spiciness is coming out now for Karina. Yeah, I don't. This wine is changing a lot, as I mentioned before, that most of them do. So what are we getting presently now that wasn't there before? Especially as we potentially could rule out Tannat from, say, southern France, but might consider Tannat from Uruguay. And if we're doing that, then we're considering more New World than we are Old World. Before we walk away from the Old World, should we consider the Grenache Syrah blend from, say, the Rhone? Could this be a Côte de Rhone? Could this be a particular village wine from a Cru village from, say, a Gigondas or a Vaqueiras? Some of that blue fruit's coming on now, and blue fruit's an indicator for me for Grenache. And Jen, I agree, yeah, it's mellowed out a little bit. It was like, you kept me in a bottle and now you let me out, and I needed a moment to breathe and aerate and just kind of loosen up and come into myself, and it finally has done that, or is doing that, and it's way more enjoyable. There's a good argument for opening wines like this a couple of minutes before you consume them, or at least giving them a half hour to kind of breathe, or a quick decant, especially in their youth like we think this one is. There's all that mintiness. This would be a very interesting Grenache Syrah, Mourvedre, or Mataro, as it's called, blend from Australia. We just tried an Australian wine, so most of me is saying it can't be another Australian wine. But it could be, and it could have that quality to it. It could be a California GSM. Grenache, when it was noted, had a lot of option, a lot of potential here, because it had the higher alcohol, it had some of that tannin structure, it had some of that richness, and I like the Grenache call, and I like the element of a little Syrah, and I like the element of maybe Mourvedre, and maybe even there's some Sanso in this, and there's some Carignan. There could be a broader Rhone blend to this particular wine. And you get some of that tart fruit, raisiny fruit, so you might have a blend, because you might have different fruit playing with each other to give you the variation in the fruit profile that we're seeing. So I'm kind of heading down that path a little bit. It's certainly probably more greatly explains the dimension in this wine than a single varietal, maybe. Pinotage is still interesting. We're not picking up a whole bunch of that asphalt kind of petroleum like we were. So Susan's kind of going with GSM Southern Rhone, and I think that's sort of where I'm headed too. But there's that mintiness. I mean, I really want to go Australia because of that mintiness. But the tannin is just a little bit more grippy and probably not quite as ripe as most of Australia. Yeah, let Stephen's going for Rhone. I think that's kind of where I'm going to settle in on this particular wine. I like where we were. I mean, I like that we considered Zinfandel. I like that we considered it pretty seriously Tannat. And if this were Tannat, it'd be a great experience to know that. The tannin certainly can be like this, but I don't usually get the fruit profile of that with Tannat, and some of what we experienced. If we had to make a call right off the bat within the first 5 minutes, I think the Tannat call from southern France would have been a very, very viable call. But this has changed quite a bit and softened and rounded out. And Chris is noting correctly that we did do a GSM kind of blend, or mostly a Grenache blend from Carène, right? That was early on. It was a Southern Rhone blend, a Southern Rhone wine. So we could be going down the wrong path, as we do repeats in this realm. So the Grenache and the Syrah and the Mourvèdre, would we have a darker color? Maybe not. We're getting a lot of tannin though. So what are we missing, guys, on the tannin front, guys and gals? Tannat gives us that. Petit Verdot gives us that. Sometimes Cabernet gives us that. Grenache does give us that. It's just that I keep getting mint. I keep getting that menthol mint on the nose. It's just really prominent. This is going to be a great lesson. The tannin is now just building and building. So what do you think? I have a little note there. Where are you landing? I've got a lot of folks landing in the Rhone. For those of you that haven't laid a final guess or a final assessment here, what are you thinking? Kenny's asking whether the blend fits. And we might need to pick quickly before the storm comes and knocks out service. That's a good point, Chris. I see clear skies off to the edge there, so hopefully, as the weather blows this way, we won't get the storm. Other blends potentially. I was just thinking, like, if we're in Italy, for example, would we be in the Veneto and kind of in an Amarone or Ripasso place that would have Corvina and Corvina blend? That could be interesting. We might get some of the tannin from that. The GSM blend Rhone is winning the day. Eric is still in the Tannat camp, which is cool. Yeah, I'm gonna have to go. If I was just doing this on my own without you guys, and we hadn't tasted 2 weeks ago a Shiraz from Australia, I would be a GSM blend from Australia. So that's kind of where I am. I don't know that answers the question of this wine quite right, but I can't get past the mint. So I want to know where the mint might be from otherwise, and that's the lesson I'm going to learn tonight. Yeah, Rick, I agree. It's a completely different wine, longer it's open. Its complexity is gaining, and there's a bit more to experience in this wine. Quite a bit more to experience, actually. And Candy, you're noting that's not French. Yeah, I don't... It would be a particular vineyard that would have some of that mintiness, and eucalyptus is not something I'm typically finding in France. So, all right, I'm gonna go for a GSM blend from Australia. I'm gonna be wrong, I think, but that's okay. What are you guys gonna have as your final guess? Karina's not getting any mint. See, I don't know, maybe it's just my glass, but I'm getting a ton. It's like every sniff is minty. All over mint. I don't know if it's somebody polished this glass with fresh mint and mint essence and menthol, and I don't smoke menthol cigarettes, so I'm not getting it from that. This is... Hi, Frank. How are you, man? Hope you're enjoying your trip. Frank might be making his way up here to visit this weekend. Kathy saying Tannat from Uruguay. Eric is not noticing any mint, but Charlotte is. So that's interesting. We got a lot of variation. Swanbergs are going Tannat. So we've got Tannat, kind of Uruguay. We've got GSM Southern Rhone. And I'm in my own camp, GSM Australia, which means I'm wrong. And thank you, Chris, for the Michael Jordan shout out. I love Michael Jordan. Netflix amazing program right now available. I was on ESPN earlier called The Last Dance. That is just a remarkable 10-part series on the Bulls and their trajectory with Michael Jordan. An outstanding watch. I find it deeply inspirational. My team will tell you I talk about Michael Jordan and the Bulls and basketball with a regularity. So it's a great compliment coming. Thank you. So we got a South American blend. We've got Uruguay and Tannat. And we're not, yes, Eric, your point is quite well taken. We're not usually quite as divided, and that's really neat. And I think it's because we're all perceiving this wine a little bit differently, which is cool. So there's an herbal note. I'm getting mint. Some of you are not. Some of you are with me on that. It's tasty. It definitely has become tasty. I wouldn't have called it tasty first, and now it is. And so it's going to be an interesting wine to know what this is because we want to have more of it in our futures. But all right, let's do it. We've been hanging out on this one, trying to beat this one, and I think it's going to beat us, but the reward is that we get to drink it. You're 100% right, Jeff. Yeah, all of our noses are different. But what is wonderful about this chat and about this sequence is that usually we are able to use our collective noses to come up with something that's pretty remarkable, and we usually zero in pretty well. And so this is a cool wine because it isn't something that we're all 100% clear on. Kathy's throwing out Uruguay and Tannat 2018 vintage. I think I'm going to put, 17 vintage of a GSM blend from Southern Australia. I'm prepared to be completely wrong. Ready, everybody? Here we go. Very, very cool. Never go against Kathy. 2017 Tannat Merlot Zinfandel blend from Uruguay. How cool is that? So we're kind of like, we're beating ourselves up because this is not a wine that exists per se. Like there isn't a known category of a blend with Merlot and Zinfandel and Tannat, but that's what we were talking about. Remember, I was jumping on Merlot and plum, and we got all the plum notes first. And we talked about Merlot, and Merlot was there for a while. And then it was Zinfandel for a while. And then the tannin came back in with Tannat for a while. This is a wine we're not supposed to get. Tony is a trickster. He threw a curveball. Julie's been sitting over here deadpan-faced, and then now she's got this kind of gleeful grin on her face, like, you're never getting this. Artesana. This is a wine from Canelones, Uruguay, and it is, I'm reading the back label, which you can too, of course, 50% Tannat, 40% Merlot, and 10% Zinfandel. How cool that we didn't at all get it, right? Some of you got way closer than me. There's a mintiness here that I didn't know existed in the context of Uruguay, and I knew I wasn't right, but you all were comfortable with Uruguay from a Tannat perspective, which is cool. The Zinfandel we couldn't quite address in the California context, which is really the only context we were considering, and yet it's here. And Merlot giving us its typical profile, but in a very different place and associating with varietals that it wouldn't otherwise normally associate with. So I think we did an excellent job getting to and around this wine, and we would lose points for our final guess, but we would gain a ton of points for assessing the wine for what it was and giving a really great kind of understanding of what is here. This wine sees 16 months in French and American oak, and I'm not getting a ton of that with as youthful as this is. So maybe some of them are older barrels. Really neat. They make some lovely wines. We've had a couple of other wines that we've served here before, especially just 100% Tannat. So yeah, this is good. I mean, I said to Julie in the beginning, like, we're not repeating anything, right? And she's like, no, we're going to do this forever and never repeat. This is one way we're not repeating when you blend Zinfandel with Merlot and Tannat and throw it in from Uruguay. But come on, we were talking about Uruguay and Tannat tonight as a group. That's pretty awesome. So, yeah, and Erica needs more of this and some of the port that we poured. Yeah, the Carcavelos port was really cool, huh? A port-style production. Yeah, Rick, women winemakers, as it says on the back, handcrafted by our award-winning women winemakers, this custom blend was made in small lots and aged for 16 months in French and American oak. Deeply aromatic with rich layered palate. some cedar in there, right? So there's some of that oak element. We got some of that cedar too. So we picked apart the components of this particular wine. We're getting to be really effective tasters. And now at some point, a random point, when a friend or somebody else brings you a bottle like this that says, I got a blind wine. You like to blind wine taste? I got a blind wine you're never gonna get. And then they pour something like this with some mint and some Tannat structure and some Merlot plum. And you go, might this be a Zinfandel Merlot Tannat blend from Uruguay? And they'll go, you're an amazing taster. You're the Michael Jordan of tasting. That's how you get there. Thanks everybody for joining me. This is such fun. We'll do it again next Thursday. And with that, we have wines available now through the 20th. So if you're interested in picking up some, you can come out and pick up a number of weeks ahead so you don't have to make multiple trips. But if you'd like to make a few trips, you can grab a burger, you can sit down and do some day drinking in the cabana and have some food along with it. Whatever and wherever you find yourself, whether you want to take out, whether you want to sit inside, or whether you want to sit outside, we have those options for you here at Field & Main, along with retail wines like this one, where you can pick up a couple of great, enjoyable wines that Tony has been putting together at a great price point that suit all occasions. And so call on us for whatever your needs are in the way of food and wine, and we're happy to help. Until next week, cheers.